Hey guys, welcome back to the Edgewater Avenue YouTube channel. I know you haven't seen this shining face in a while. If you're new here, my name is Katie Fredrickson and I'm the owner of Edgewater Avenue. And on this channel, we like to sew swimwear. So I've been doing this for a while now and I've changed a lot of the ways that I do things, but unfortunately that's not reflected in past videos. So this video is going to have some updated tips as well as some corrections on things that I have been so wrong on in the past. And these tips are whether you're beginner, intermediate, advanced, expert, any of that. These tips will be very helpful. So of course I want to share with you what those tips are. And so now we're going to go over 8 tips for sewing swimwear. Tip 1 is to use a basting stitch before serging. I saw this tip in a YouTube comment and I have never gone back since. So this is done instead of pinning, and now I hardly ever pin anymore. I cut my pieces and then I take them straight over to the sewing machine. To make a basting stitch, select the straight stitch function on your machine and make your stitch length as long as possible. And the point of this is to put a temporary stitch that will keep your fabric from sliding around while serging. I've also found that my elastic application is flawless anytime I do this. Since the straight stitch cannot be stretched and swimwear needs to stretch, you'll need to either take it out or break it before finishing the garment. So after you're done serging, you could go back with a seam ripper and take out the stitch, but what I tend to do is I just take the seam and I just rip it. And I don't know if that makes me a crazy person, but I have so much trust in my overlock stitch that it is going to stretch that I'm really not worried about breaking any threads. So I'm going to show you and I'm going to try and get it on the audio. This is a test piece that I've been using, but I have a straight stitch in here. So let's see, hold it close to the mic. It sounds really scary, I know. However, breaking the stitch or removing it is a very important step, because imagine if you're a customer and you put on your swimsuit for the first time and all you hear are threads ripping. Probably not the best way to market yourself and have a customer have their first impression of you. So if you are going to utilize this tip, don't forget to remove or break the basting stitch. Tip 2 is sew the inner layers first when attaching 4 layers of fabric. This tip also uses a basting stitch and it follows the same logic as tip 1, which is using a basting stitch is going to make the process easier. Take one pieces for example. When you're sewing the sides together through all 4 layers of fabric, it can get tricky being consistent with it and making sure all the layers get sewn evenly. So instead, I'll sew the 2 inner layers first and then I'll go back and sew all 4. And I don't just do this with sides, I do it with gussets and straps if they're being sewn in that way. Tip number 3 is try an elastic foot. I went years without using an elastic foot because I got pretty good at attaching it without it and I didn't really think that I needed it. Big mistake. And now that I have one, I cannot imagine it any other way. And especially now that I'm using tip 1, doing a basting stitch before, I cannot explain to you how perfect my elastic application is and how consistent it is. Every single time it's coming out perfect. Now I'm going to make a dedicated video on the elastic foot, but one tip I do want to include here is that I have my elastic foot set so it's at the loosest possible tension. But I will get into that in another video that is going to come out after this one, probably in the month of January. One other thing I do want to mention is I have seen a lot of mixed reviews on whether or not an elastic foot actually is helpful. Some people, like me, swear by them, whereas others will not go near them and they've just had nothing but bad experiences even though they've really put in the effort. And I'm not sure if that has to do with the machine that it's being used on or the quality of the foot or the fabric or even the elastic, but there are mixed reviews out there. Overall, it's been such a benefit to me that I do think it's worth investing just to try it out and see if it could really change your sewing. And remember, when you're buying an elastic foot, you'll need to get one that's compatible with your machine. And that's because sewing feet are not universal. Oh my gosh. Are you serious? I guess I'll just lean over here or something. I have a Baby Lock Evolution, and in case you also have that machine, I did link the foot that I'm using in the description. Tip 4. Sewing the sides and attaching the straps with a straight stitch will help to prevent bulkiness. So in pretty much all of my old videos, you'll see that I'm using a overlock stitch for the entirety of the suit. However, I saw a lot of people in the Facebook group, which, by the way, Facebook group will be linked. I saw a bunch of people in the Facebook group who were saying that they use a straight stitch instead of an overlock stitch to attach the sides and the straps. I've tried that out and I've been really happy with the results, so much so that I don't use an overlock stitch to attach sides and straps anymore. Especially when it comes to straps, being able to do a straight stitch and then trim off the excess goes a long way for preventing bulkiness. It makes all the difference and it really makes a clean look. I get a little bit nervous attaching the sides with just a straight stitch, but so far I haven't had any problems and I think I just have trust issues. However, sometimes for the sides, one pieces especially, I'll do my straight stitch, but then I'll also go over it with an overlock stitch. But for straps especially, this tip is very useful. Tip 5, high quality polyester is the best thread to use. So this is a correction that I'm going back on. Originally, I swore by woolly nylon, but as I learn and grow, I learned that woolly nylon has its own issues. For one, I've seen comments from some customers who have just never been able to make it work for them, whether it be it's just not threading on their machine or they're having tension issues. And so it turns out, over a long period of time, woolly nylon will actually lose its tension. I also learned that woolly nylon has a coating on it that's not good for tension discs or needles. So this is all news to me. I had no... Oh my gosh. Okay, I had to move because the lighting was just getting worse and worse. And now I'm on my floor. Welcome to the Edgewater Avenue HQ floor. Anyways, so all this stuff about woolly nylon is news to me. I've never had any of these issues before, but I did get this information from reputable sources that I do trust. So it's also weird that a thread that is made for sergers would be harmful to them and be kind of useless. So I don't know what the deal is with woolly nylon and what's going on with that, but I just use a high quality polyester. So if you still do want to use woolly nylon, which if you've never had any issues with it, then it might be okay. Just make sure only to use it on the loopers because of the issue. Apparently it's more common in the needles where it'll leave a sticky residue. However, I have switched to use completely high quality polyester thread and I haven't had any issues with threads breaking. I think back when I first started my videos, I wasn't using the right type of stitch. And so I do think that more contributed to me wanting something that would stretch better, and so hence woolly nylon came in the picture for me. Now that I know that my stitch quality is so much better and I'm using the right settings, I don't really need to worry that much about stretching because it's the stitch itself that stretches, not the thread. And also back then, when I was making those videos, I was using really cheap quality polyester thread, and so no wonder I was having issues with the thread breaking. It just wasn't good quality thread. So if you can, definitely invest in some high quality polyester thread, and that will be all that you need. Tip 6 is place the final hole in a discrete place. If you've watched a bunch of my videos, you know exactly what I'm talking about. With the concealed seams method, in order to make it completely concealed, there's going to be one tiny little hole that's left over in the end. And in pretty much all of my tutorials, I mention that you do need to make this hole, you take everything to the right side, and then the final step is you finish off that hole. Which, since we're on the topic of concealed seams, that's something else I want to mention. I did used to use the term seamless, which is incorrect. It's not seamless. There are seams, right? And it doesn't really, I mean, if we're being technical, yeah, of course, it's the incorrect term, and as someone in my position, I shouldn't teach that term. However, the way that I see it, it's also customers are searching for seamless swimwear. And so no wonder I was using that term, and no wonder so many people use that term. It's because it's kind of what the customers look for, and they aren't thinking of technical swimwear knowledge. So seamless is concealed seams. If you want to be correct, use concealed seams. Anyways, back to the tip. So where to put the final hole? Lately I've been putting it in a much more discreet place. I used to put it right where the tag would go, in the back of a piece, but lately I've been putting it under either the armhole or on bottoms. I'll put them on the front or back piece really close to the gusset. This is also a great tip because then when you're finishing off the hole, instead of using an invisible stitch and stitching it by hand like I have done in the past, you can actually use a top stitch, and as long as you do it nice enough, it'll look clean and put away. You don't have to worry about the unsightliness of it, because it'll be tucked away under the arm or up towards the gusset. And doing it with the top stitch is just so much more efficient than having to get out your needle and your thread and tying the knot and, you know, do your little, what is it, blanket stitch, ladder stitch, invisible stitch. Whereas the machine, you can just go bzzz, then you're done. Tip number 7 is stretch the elastic while you're sewing the leg holes in order to provide more support. So it's in the nature of reversible swimwear to be kind of slidey and not the most secure form of swimwear, but one way of preventing this is stretching the elastic in the leg holes. This way it'll grip more onto your legs and not be as slidey. So to do this, when you're sewing your elastic onto your leg holes, stretch the elastic just slightly as you're sewing, or if you're using an elastic foot, you're going to tighten the tension on that elastic foot so there's just a little bit of tension. And what this does is it makes the elastic shorter than the fabric and thus creating tension. Then when the piece is worn, the elastic stretches, and as it relaxes onto your legs, it's holding that tension, which will keep it in place. So tip 8, which goes hand in hand with tip 7, is to use thicker elastic for more security. I use 1/4 inch elastic for pretty much everything, but if you did want to have a little bit more support in the leg holes, you might want to try something like 3/8 inch. 3/8 inch. 3/8. Why can I not say this? You're going to want to try something more like 3/8. But again, this is going to be one of those things that's personal preference. You might like your 1/4 inch elastic just fine. Don't really see you need to switch it up. Great. If you do find that you just want that extra added bit of support and you don't want to risk anything going up your butt, then 3/8 might be better. And what's so interesting is how different people feel about elastic. Some people do not like elastic at all. They don't use it in any of their garments. They hate rubber elastic especially, and they use that like clear elastic and stuff, so it's a little more comfortable. Whereas some people, like me, I mean, I love rubber elastic. I think it has the perfect amount of security. It is the best stuff to use for swimwear. But some people do have the preference where they just don't want as much constriction. So personal preference when it comes to elastic. Technically, yes, you should always use elastic no matter what. However, so that wraps up all the tips that I've been using. Thank you for making it to the end. I hope this video may have answered some questions that you might have or provided a tip that you're going to be implementing. And I learned most of these tips from you. So if you have any other tips that you wanted to add to this video, then make sure to comment them in the description. I love to read over them and they could be helpful for other people. If you're not already, follow at Edgewater Av on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of that. And make sure to join the Facebook group, especially in regards to this video. Tips are shared in the Facebook group every single day. And you might be having some specific issue that you can't figure out. Guess what? There's more than 3,000 people there to help. So all of that will be linked in the description. Anyways, thank you again for watching and I'll see you next time.